33 drivers, 4 turns, 500 miles. This is the Indy 500, the jewel in the crown of American motor racing. Or if you're Stingray Rob, another opportunity to bin yourself into a barrier. Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the comedy review, as the IndyCar season heads to the greatest spectacle in racing. See, I got it right this year. The Indy 500 really has no comparison. 500 miles of a simple oval, it sounds easy to the uninformed pleb. In reality, there's a reason why this race needs more practice sessions than I have passive income streams. The Brickyard bites. One small mistake and you could end up like poor Stingray here. The 2023 edition of the race spelt this out perfectly, ending in what some are describing as quite controversial circumstances. I guess that comes down as to whether you're a Newgarden fan or not. We've got a lot to dive into then, so let's not waste any more time and get into the comedy review for the 2023 Indianapolis 500. Now before we get into the racing itself, I think it's apt we look at some of the new liveries gracing the grid this year. Yes, even this one. My personal favourites had to be the main McLaren trio of O'Ward, Rossi and Rosenqvist. The team was celebrating their 60th birthday, or 60 years since they were actually good. The Triple Crown homages were fantastic. Santino Ferrucci's patriotic trash can, on the other hand, less so. For those who are maybe unaware, Santino doesn't have a whole lot of fans across the pond, mainly down to his stint here in Europe, where he was basically a bit of a cunt. Honestly, I'm surprised Ferrucci's car wasn't fitted with a foghorn and missile-striked an innocent family in Iraq every time it crossed the finish line. I'm sure this livery will be loved by some, but as someone who's about as patriotic as a foreign migrant, it just makes me want to be sick. Along with the new liveries, IndyCar were introducing some new rules for the 2023 edition of the race. These included the removal of double points, upgraded aero devices, and rear wheel tethers to prevent them from flying off the car during an accident. Safe to say, these worked out really well. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the big names heading into this race, and the storylines that were already shaping up throughout the month of May. First of all, we've got to talk about Tony Kanaan. The popular Brazilian was back on the grid for his last ever race in IndyCar. He won the 500 back in 2013, and aimed to go out with a bang. Hopefully not like his attempt in 2009 though. Ryan Hunter-Reay was also back driving for Dreyer and Reinbold Racing, though if I'm honest, I don't think anyone particularly cared. As for the regulars, Marcus Ericsson took the 500 win in dramatic fashion last year, and would want to do so again, if not for the pride and fame, then for the extra $400,000 bonus awarded to the next back-to-back winner of the race. This is America after all. He'd be under threat from 2023 title rivals Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward, and we probably shouldn't count out Joseph Newgarden as well. He may not have won the 500 before, but has been dominant on other ovals in the past, including a win at the Texas Motor Speedway earlier this year. Finally, there was Stingray Rob. Once again, he's simply here because he has a cool name, and that's about it. Oh, and he might hit the wall later on. Anyway, I've rambled for long enough, so I might as well start covering the actual on-track action. Now, since the race has about 1 million different practice sessions, rather than covering them all in depth, here were the headlines coming into qualifying. In the past, the Speedway has generally been dominated by Honda power, and while the Chip Ganassi cars were still topping the timesheets, a few Chevy-powered drivers were starting to make an impression. Team Penske's Joseph Newgarden managed to set the fastest average speed in the first open test back in April, and perhaps more surprisingly, the AJ Foyt cars of Santino Ferrucci and Benjamin Pedersen presented themselves as potential frontrunners as practice rolled on. I guess we were all lucky that Pedersen wasn't attracted to the Indianapolis runoff like he has been in other races this season, mainly because Indianapolis runoff is usually a metal fence. On the other side of the equation, we find the Andretti cars, who were filling their typical oval role of being profoundly underwhelming. Could always be worse though. You could be driving a Rahal Letterman Lanigan car. Come qualifying, they were the ones who were struggling. Catherine Legg managed to squeeze through into the top 30, but Christian Lundgaard, Jack Harvey and Graham Rahal all found themselves in the bottom 4 at the end of Saturday. Oh, and Stingray Rob, because why not, I guess. With the field capped at 33 cars for the race, one of them would be going home, and after a tight fought battle, Graham Rahal would just miss out after his teammate Jack Harvey pipped into 33rd on the last run of the day. As Graham had a mental breakdown, we can turn our attention to the front of the field, where Rosenqvist, Ferrucci, VK, Palou, Dixon and O'Ward had qualified for the Fast 6 shootout to decide the front 2 rows of the grid. Chevy power very nearly prevailed here, But in the end, it was the Chip Ganassi Honda of Alex Palou who took pole position, setting the second fastest 4-lap average in Indy 500 history. It was also the closest front row we'd ever seen, just 0.1 of a mile an hour splitting the top three. With plenty now for the stat men to fornicate over, we can finally start to talk about the race, right? Well, not quite, as apparently we need to practice even more before the green flag flies on Sunday. You may have noticed so far that no one has managed to do what we regularly see at Indy and bin their car at high speed into the wall. That was until Catherine Legg decided she wanted to be a sausage curb and break Stefan Wilson's vertebrae. Though Wilson was alright after the crash, his injuries prevented him from taking part in the 500. Given that the car qualifies rather than the driver, Dreyer and Reinbold could have put a Teletubby in that car for all that mattered. Instead, they went with Graham Rahal, though I'm still an advocate of Tinky Winky here. Anyway, now we can cover the race, right? Well, still no, as it was time for the annual Indy 500 Pit Stop Challenge. People actually wanted me to cover this for some reason. Well, Scott Dixon would end up defeating Penske's Will Power in the finals, which, looking at his performances so far this year, might be the only thing he wins all season. Right, now we can talk about the race, and after your standard anthem and guns and rolling Roger Penske out of his care home to remind drivers that they needed to start their engines, Alex Palou led the entire field to green. Well, almost the entire field. When the number 24 car realised it now had Graham Rahal in the driver's seat, it decided to have electrical issues, meaning he started 2 laps down and already out of contention. Now Indy is one of those races you don't actually want to lead until the final few laps. This didn't bother Rinus VeeKay though, as he sailed past Palou on lap 3 to take P1. All in all though, it had been a relatively drama-free start for the Indy 500, though the first issues would emerge on Scott Dixon's car. The Aussie suffering from massive vibrations, forcing him to stop early on, where allegedly his wife asked the team to keep that set of tyres so she could have a go later. Oh, I'm sorry. Action seemed confined to the pit lane in the early stages, Catherine Legg trying to one-up her incident from earlier in the week when she tried to send one of the mechanics to the Paralympics. Following this, the team retired the car for the sake of everybody else around the track. Returning to the battle at the front, Palou and VeeKay would come into the pits, but the overcut seemed to be more powerful than expected, cycling Felix Rosenqvist in the McLaren to the effective race lead by lap 69. Oh, grow up. Pato O'Ward would sling one up the inside of VeeKay, making it a McLaren 1-2, as the Team America car of Ferrucci also began to stretch its muscles. The McLarens were beautifully managing what was miraculously a caution-free race somehow. But don't forget, Stingray's in the field, so really it's just a matter of, see, look, there you go. Rob hit the barrier after accusing Graham Rahal of being a Jedi and using his force powers to push him into the wall. And it was about to get even more dicey in the pit lane, as VeeKay got fed up with battling with Palou and decided to just spear him into the barrier. After the Ed Carpenter racing driver was penalised for the incident, both ended up at the back. This was great news for the McLaren boys of O'Ward and Rosenqvist, though they did have the Juncos car of Callum Ilott ahead on a different strategy come the restart. Well, I say that, Callum put up the defence of a dead badger, a bit like the one that's made it onto Santino Ferrucci's head these days. Back to the restart, and there was more drama further back. 2016 winner Alex Rossi claiming the FP1 Biggest Balls award for going round the outside at turn 2. And then we got a 4-wide moment that somehow didn't end up with 4 cars in the catch fencing. Marcus Ericsson was trying to put himself in contention now, sizing up a move on Ferrucci as the race began to settle down for a bit. So, as we all looked to Devlin Di Francesco to bring out the next caution, we forgot that Romain Grosjean was also in the field. He got bored after 150 laps, binning his DHL Honda in the wall. By now, Ericsson and Newgarden had fought their way to the front, and this was where things began to get interesting. Newgarden immediately went on the attack, taking the lead from the Swede as we went back to green. Ferrucci, meanwhile, made up 2 positions around the outside of the first corner, the American looking to make his mark in the 500-mile race. Also looking to make his mark was Felix Rosenqvist, except all of his impressions seemed to be into the safer barrier with 16 laps to go. Rosenqvist would then spin back across the track and collect the right rear of Kyle Kirkwood, sending the Pink Auto Nation Honda cockpit first into the wall, whilst his tyre made an escape for freedom over the fence and into the crowd. Thankfully, all that hit was a Chevy in the parking lot, and the irony of Kirkwood driving a Honda-powered car aside, that dent was probably an improvement anyway. With IndyCar wanting the race to end under green, the red flag was brought out, and I would spare you guys the torture here, but too many of you asked for this, so here you go. When we resumed, it would be Ryan Hunter-Reay leading the field, having not pitted before the red flag. This isn't Formula 1 though, and there's no such thing as a free pit stop under these conditions, so he would quickly hand the P1 battle back to O'Ward and Ericsson. But let's not count out Joseph Newgarden. He went from 3rd to 1st as we went green in a bid to win his first Indy 500. Pato O'Ward rather wanted to do that as well, so much so he got a little too excited and turned his Indy car into a 200-mile-an-hour fidget spinner. Simon Pagenaud would get a taste of his own medicine when McLaughlin punted him from behind, whilst Canapino decided he'd seen enough for the day and fell asleep at the wheel. Here we go again. There was now just 5 laps to go. Newgarden leading from Ericsson and Ferrucci, as just like last year we get a dramatic sprint to the hour for God's sake. Rahal, Carpenter and Andretti wouldn't even make it across the finish line, whilst Benjamin Pedersen got jealous behind and thought he'd just have his own little accident for good measure. We were red flagged again, and this time there wasn't enough laps remaining to form up and go racing. Surely Marcus Ericsson then, who'd snatched the lead from Newgarden before the children fell out at the back, had won the race. But then we found out that IndyCar had made a surprise new signing in the form of Michael Massey, and that we were going to have a further twist in the tail here. It was decided that we would throw all the regular IndyCar rules out the window and go for a one-lap shootout to the flag. This is sounding rather familiar, isn't it? Newgarden was able to use this to his advantage, and though Ericsson was able to fend him off through turn 1, the Penske driver was able to get back past down the straightaway and win his first Indy 500. What an incredible finish! Though that's going to cause some controversy. Regardless, Newgarden wasn't going to complain. He threw himself into the crowd, which I thought was rather risky given what just went down. I mean, can you imagine Verstappen doing that after Abu Dhabi 2021? I'd imagine he'd find himself rather quickly getting shot by a deranged Hamilton cultist. For me, I'm neutral. As long as Santino Ferrucci doesn't win, I'm happy. So I absolutely love this, but a Penske winning in controversial circumstances at a track now owned by Roger Penske. Look, don't shoot the messenger, I'm just setting up the fallout in the comments below. I would love to know what you thought on this one, so let me know down there, and while you're at it, I'd really appreciate a like on the video and you subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. We recently crossed 69,000 subscribers, so a huge thank you on that really crucial milestone. We're on the road to 100k now, so if you haven't subbed yet, I'd really appreciate you helping me out. Final thank you, of course, goes to all my patrons and channel members. If you want to get involved in that, then you can find all the relevant links down in the description below. That, though, is all from me, so I'll see you very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.